My guest today is Atlas Alux. Atlas is the innermost being and true self of Attila Louis Lenvi, his mortal vessel, servant, and stenographer. Attila holds university degrees in English, dramatic arts, and business administration. A social entrepreneur, consultant, blogger, YouTube creator, and author, he has over 30 years of marketing, branding, and communications experience. Atlas lives in Guelph, Ontario, where he devotes himself to the Atlas Project, which is his life's work. The Atlas Project seeks solutions for suffering humanity in the midst of its Kali Yuga, which is the end times. To that end, Atlas Alux recently published a book entitled What in the Hell is With Us? Transhumanist AI, Conspiracy Red Pill, Woke Culture Wars, New Age Awakening, and The Great Awakening, which is available in paperback, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook formats from Amazon and most other online retailers. Welcome, Atlas.
Oh, thank you so much, Tia. Thank you for having us today. We're grateful.
Absolutely.
We're grateful to be here.
I'm grateful to have you as my guest. You are the innermost being of the mortal body that you reside inside. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, most people and most of your listeners, I imagine, have some sort of concept about their true self or their higher self. I imagine most people will resonate with the notion that the body that they're in, the name that they were given, and that the personality that they have is not really who they are. And that most people will resonate with this inner self. And we're not talking about the inner voices in the head here. We're talking about something much deeper. It is the actual source of our consciousness. It is the very amness that we feel when we meditate, for example, and we experience ourselves inside of our body as opposed to being identified and attached to it. And we realize these aren't my thoughts and these aren't my emotions. These are thoughts that I am having, and these are emotions that I am feeling, but they're transitory, they're impermanent. They're they're related to the character that I'm playing in this MMORPG called life. This is how in traditional esotericism and traditional spirituality, we look upon the vessel, the mortal vessel, or the mortal self, right? And the innermost being is that true self, the monad, the divine vessel that travels from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. Because you may not believe it, Tia, but you haven't always been a beautiful young woman. In previous lifetimes, you could have been a man, right? And prior to that, if you go back enough lifetimes, at some point, we were all animals. And before that, we were all plants. And before that, believe it or not, we were all in the mineral kingdom. Because our higher self, our divine vessel, has to go through that process of evolution through each one of those kingdoms before we can graduate to the human kingdom. And that's where we all are in now. We're all basically in essentially what you might consider high school, if you will, high school for our higher self, our true self, because humanity is the highest kingdom that one can exist in at the planetary level, at the three-dimensional level. And then from here, we move on into the supernal worlds or the higher dimensions, right? And that's a whole different ball game. That's when the game of life becomes entirely different. But from that point forward, we no longer have a physical vessel to be concerned with, right? We no longer have a character in the video game because we're not in the video game anymore, right? We're existing as players again.
So you are kind of the player of the avatar. You're actually somewhere else, kind of controlling this figure.
Well, so the metaphysical science of this can be a little bit difficult to understand or a little bit difficult to grasp. but a very large chunk of our consciousness is here and now and in this body, right? Because our focus is here and now, especially in this particular moment. However, we have a separate self, which also has other activities that it performs in the supernal worlds, in the higher dimensions. The real easy way to understand this is if you've ever played a video game. You know that when you take control of a character in the game, your attention and your consciousness and your focus has to be on the character in the game that you're playing, because you won't win the game otherwise, right? But at the same time, you can be sitting on your couch or at the computer, right? And you have your hand on the computer mouse, or you've got your fingers are working the controller, and you don't forget the fact that you're in your living room, right? Like you don't, some people, it is very easy to lose yourself in the game, of course, but we never become wholly unconscious of the reality that we're in just because we're playing a game. So if you can imagine that, our innermost being experiences something similar. So they're here playing the game of life, and we are the character that they are trying to control and trying to accomplish their work in the game world through us, right? We are their vessel, their vehicle, their servant, essentially. Um, but they also have that other life, right? That other presence, that other existence in the supernal worlds. Just like we can never fully immerse ourselves into a video game. It's just not possible. It's physically impossible, and in the case of our innermost being, it's metaphysically impossible.
So, do you know where you are playing this game from? Are you aware of any of your surroundings? Is it another dimension?
Now I have in personally, I've met my innermost being in the fifth dimension, right? Through while lucid dreaming, or what we call astral projection, right? However, here and now in this moment, I couldn't tell you what Atlas was doing, or where he was, or what other things that he's doing right at this moment, because the consciousness of Atlas, which I have access to, is related to here and now being in the game world and being in this moment with you and conducting this interview. So there's a one of the things about spirituality and esotericism that is a very good rule of thumb to remember is information is on a need to know basis. So if it wouldn't serve me to know, it wouldn't serve me, the mortal vessel, to be troubled by all of the idiosyncrasies of my divine vessel's existence in the supernal worlds. That's information that I don't need in order to do my part in the relationship, right? So that's why it's not given unto me to know that information or have access to that information. All I need to know is to remain conscious and aware of the will of my innermost being. Or to come back to that video game analogy, my job as the character in the game is to respond to the commands that are being sent to me through the video game controller by my innermost player. That's my responsibility, is to my higher self, my true self, the player. And that's, and that's the only information that I receive, because anything over and above that would be a distraction, would be superfluous, and in many ways could even be a hindrance to us fulfilling our work here.
Exactly. It's kind of like if someone were in the kitchen making dinner, you wouldn't need to know those details while you're trying to win a level on Super Mario or something like that. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's a good enough way to understand it as any. Yeah, sure.
So while you are Attila, you have constant access to Atlas as well.
Well, we have come to that point in our progress in our journey where we have um, we have attained a level of being where, for example, in this particular case, whenever you hear us use the word we, it means we're speaking as Atlas, right? If you hear us say I, it's usually because we're speaking from the point of view of the mortal vessel, from Attila's point of view. So, for example, we will say, when I was younger, yeah, I had some intuition here and there, just like everybody, right? But I couldn't, I couldn't speak with the voice of Atlas when I was younger, right? This was a process that I had to go through and undergo in order to get to a place where, well, like now, we can speak as Atlas. And so I, the mortal vessel, am a conduit for, and so when I'm typing, I can basically type as I'm receiving from Atlas. So it's like a constant state of meditation, but it's not that. It's not meditation. It's just a constant state of being present and aware and being open and being able to receive from Atlas that which uh, which I need to receive and to then speak it if, for example, in this case, right? Or when we're doing our own podcasts or when we're doing our own live streams on YouTube, none of which are scripted and all of which they average somewhere between 2 hours and 4 hours long. And it's mostly just us speaking. So it couldn't be scripted. Like we couldn't memorize 4 hours, every week, and there would be no point because we do something that a good friend of ours, Wolfgang, calls speaking to the listening, right? So we say what needs to be heard, in other words, and we can't possibly know that until we're in the moment. When I, Attila, am speaking as Atlas, I am conscious and aware, but completely, I am one with Atlas. We have achieved union. That's yug in Sanskrit is means to bind together as one. It's the same meaning as the Latin religare, and yug is the root word of yoga, and religare is the root word of religion. They mean the same thing, meaning to bind together as one, as in the ties that bind, like wedding bands. So it's two entities that become as one. It's not one that's taking over the other and possessing the other. It's not like that. It's very difficult to explain or to describe, but anybody who has ever been, let's say, following their bliss in life, so they're on mission, they're doing what they were born to do. Maybe you're a dancer, maybe you're a potter, or maybe you're a pianist, or whatever it is that you do, that when you do it, it gives you all of that tremendous bliss. It's not joy, it's not happiness, it's above that. It's that fulfillment that comes from within. In those moments, you are one with your innermost being. When you are on point and on purpose and doing what you were born to do, and you know it, you feel it, you can feel it coming, it's coming through you. It's not coming from you, it's coming through you. Anyone who has ever experienced that knows then what it means to be one in those moments with their higher self. Because only the higher self is capable of creating such incredible feelings as bliss, as fulfillment, right? A mortal vessel cannot feel that way without the the approval of the higher self. Bliss comes, all like joy, happiness, love, these all come from the higher self. So when we experience these, we think it's me. We think, oh, I'm happy, I'm this, I'm that, I'm feeling joy or whatever. But when you experience those, those moments that are transcendent, and these incredible feelings are coming through you from within, in those moments you are connected to your innermost, your true self, right? So anyone, listening can go into meditation and do a retrospection on their life on those moments and say, okay, so that's what it feels like. So that's what it's like for this Atlas guy. It's like that all the time, to be living your bliss. We just did a live stream on this last Sunday called Follow Your Bliss, where we were talking about the metaphysical science of following your bliss, because that's what Joseph Campbell said on how to find meaning and purpose in your life when he wrote about the heroic journey. So if you follow your bliss, that's doing those things which give you the fulfillment which comes from within, that nothing else and no one else can give you. And that's when you're living your life in alignment. Well, you know what? Some New Age people like to use words like alignment and things like that. So alignment is fine, and alignment's good. Alignment's a good way to think about it. But really, in order to fully be, it's more than just alignment. Alignment is the first step, and the second step is oneness, union.
Like a meshing together where there's no division.
There's
That
there's no division at that point, and there's no coercion. There's no there's harmony. Right? You think about it in those, like, it's, you think about it in the ways like, remember in the olden days when people used to dance together, like real dancing, right? And two people, they would come together and they would dance. And two complete strangers could come together and dance and move together as one on the dance floor. This was such a beautiful practice. It is such a tragedy that it has fallen out of favor in the popular culture. Now people jump up and down to the beat, right? They get jiggy with it all by themselves. That's not dancing, right? Because you lose the ability to experience with a total stranger. You come together and as one, because you have the music, number one, to move you, and secondly, you have the ability to do this dance where sometimes the man leads, but then sometimes he lets go and the woman leads. And so there's always a little bit, like, someone has to lead in a dance. There has to be that, but it's never coercive, it's never forceful, it's never demanding. It's dancing. It's always beautiful and harmonious, or like two musicians coming together to jam together. And what they produce is this beautiful sound. And without any, it's just spontaneous. It just happens, right? There are many examples like this that we can find in our own lives, that when we feel into those moments and when we meditate on those moments, we get a sense of, aha, okay, so this is what union is. This is what yug is, what relegare is, yoga, religion. This is what it really means. Union with divinity, union with our higher self, to be as one with. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. There's no tension. It's completely relaxed. It's totally spontaneous, and it's completely natural from a perspective of divine nature. From the perspective of mechanical nature, right? Our egos fight tooth and nail against this all the time. This is what our egos don't want us to be able to experience. That's why our egos always keep us in tension and in stress and anxiety, because you try dancing with someone who's stiff, right? Who's got their back up tight and they're all stiff and they're mechanical, and you know what I mean? Like they can't relax. You can't dance if you can't relax. You can't harmonize with someone if you're all tense, or you're afraid, or you're worried. Try jamming with someone in, musically, if you're worried about the notes, right? It's just you can't achieve that level of um fluidity, right? So when you think about the yin and yang, for example, right? Or you just, if you can visualize a lava lamp, and if you can visualize how the oil and wax, you apply heat and it melts the wax, and then you get this movement, and it's just this fluidic thing going on, right? And it's these are the types of things that when you think about being one with your higher self, it's and there's an allowing in that. Like we were talking about dancing, if someone else is leading, you kind of have to trust and allow where they're leading you on the dance floor. But there's also, in that trust and allowing, there's an even deeper surrender. And the surrender is, for example, to one's destiny, to one's bliss, to one's moment, right? The surrender is where you take allowing and trusting to the next level. And that's when you the capacity for union with your higher self reaches a whole different level, because because what you're surrendering is your lower self, your ego, your desires, what you want, right? What I want, or what I think, or my opinions, or what I want to go, or what I want the outcomes to be, or where I want to go on the dance floor. It's like, no, when what you are surrendering is all of that I-ness. And when you surrender that I, you create space, right? It's like when Buddha talked about being an empty cup. If your cup is full, right, and you're a vessel, right? If you think of yourself as a vessel, but you're all full, how can how can you draw water from the spring? How can you draw water from the well if you're already full? So the act of surrender is the act of getting yourself out of the way of yourself.
I just did a video the other day, or an interview a couple days ago, with a gentleman who was talking about this as well. The prayer, the main prayer in Bali, part two of the prayer is surrendering or offering everything that you are to God. So that makes a lot of sense. I can
Well,
understand what you're saying. And I want to talk about this a lot more, but I want to go back to kind of in your past.
mhm.
And how did this come to be? Is this something that people can work on in themselves, or was it destiny for you to become this? Was it written in the stars, or how can others do this as well?
Okay, so it's serendipitous because we were just going to tell you uh, exactly that. Um, the answer is yes. To everything that you just asked, the answer is yes. There's no, in the world of consciousness, in the world of truth, there is no dichotomies of this or that, yes or no. It's reality is very voluptuous, and it's comprehensive, it's holistic. So the answer to all of those questions is yes. And in our case, our purpose was to go through a tremendous amount of suffering in order to get to where we are now, precisely so that we could share with you and the world the methodology that anyone can use in order to achieve what we've achieved. And that methodology is the analogous ultimate methodology, what we call the Aum of life. And the Aum is also, the mantra of the heart chakra. But most people spell it incorrectly because they spell it OM. The heart chakra is actually much bigger than the heart. The heart chakra extends from the collarbone all the way down to the reproductive organs, the sexual organs. So when you say Aum, you're you're uh, you're pronouncing the vowels, the mantras of the thymus gland and the lungs, the heart, the solar plexus, and the sexual organs. Aum. And that is the mantra of the heart, Aum. And this analogous ultimate methodology, as we explained it in our book, and as we described how we came about in practical ways, applying it throughout our life, not knowing that we were applying it. If you get my meaning, I didn't know. I was learning the Aum of life. I was just living it. I was going through it. I was getting the experience, the experiential knowledge, so that when I finally got to a deep enough level of hell where push came to shove and I was shown a fork in the road and asked the big question, to be or not to be, and what I would be doing for the rest of my life, I chose to be. And from there on, all of my past fell into place and crystallized. And it was revealed to me how my entire life was preparing me for instance, this precise moment. And last year when we published our book, because the first part of our book is our life story. Because in that, but we tell the story, we reveal everything that we went through, and a lot of the suffering and everything, the challenges that we faced, including the pinnacle challenge that we faced as an adult, which was dealing with adult onset epilepsy. And just we went through the allopathic medical system, and nothing, none of the doctors, none of the specialists could help. We were suffering from like 3 or 4 seizures a day. And we eventually made it to Canada's top epilepsy clinic in London Health Sciences Medical Center. And they had a clinic there where they drilled a couple holes in our skull, and we had a bundle of cables coming out of the back of our head like this, because they put in electrodes against our brain. And for nearly a month, we were in there, and they were inducing seizures, and some supercomputer in some other room was monitoring what was happening to us during our seizures and collecting data and everything else. And their proposal was, okay, well, we know where your seizures are coming from, so we propose to cut out a quarter of your brain, and we give you 50-50 chance of curing your epilepsy. And, you know, in that moment, I received the message, loud and clear, there's another way. And so I thanked the doctor, I thanked the surgeon. They were really pissed off that because I thanked them and I said, I'll take it under advisement, but this is a big decision. I got to think about this.
Now, I want to ask one question. Was this before you had become one with Atlas, or had you already been
No,
introduced?
this is before.
Okay.
This is before. So I'm getting to that. This is when I was in, this is my deepest pit of hell up until that point in my life. Because, you know, at that point, I mean, I couldn't drive. I couldn't function in any reasonable way. and I was living at home with my parents, uh, and I was like 30. I was in my mid 30s, mid to late 30s, and um, but I came home and I turned on the computer and I opened up a Google search window and I knelt down in front of the computer and I prayed. Now, I did know enough about my higher self. I had done some research and some esoteric study and whatnot, right? I had taken several esoteric books with me into the epilepsy center. I mean, I was going to be there for a month, so I was reading esoteric books and so on while I was there, while I was lying in this bed, and they were with these electrodes in my brain. But when I came back, I knelt down in front of the computer and I prayed, and I said, "Okay, um, you said there was another way. Well, let me tell you what I have to say, and that is clearly I'm not qualified. I have encountered in this condition, in this epilepsy, I have met my match and I'm not qualified to take it on. I have exhausted every worldly means available to me. I've seen so many doctors, I've tried so many other things. I've exhausted, I'm at the end of my rope, in other words. So clearly, I'm not qualified to tackle this problem. But I prayed. I said, if you show me the way, if you show me the way out of this hell, I will walk it. And not only will I walk it, if you give me back my life, if you make it possible for me to have a life after being in this hell, then I will devote that life to you. Because if you give that life back to me, that life is yours. I devote and dedicate my life to you, to your work, to your will, because my life is forfeit. My life is as good. I'm as good as I'm a goner. They're gonna cut out a quarter of my brain. I'm not gonna be me anymore. I don't know what I'm gonna be. So my life is effectively over, functionally and practically speaking. I'm as good as dead. So if you give me my life back, that life belongs to you. It only makes sense. This is what in this is the in what in literature and in ancient mythology and scripture as people call a life debt or a life bond, right? Where someone saves your life and then you basically have to serve that person for the rest of your life because they're the ones who saved you. And so this is the relationship I had this is the prayer, the promise that I made to Atlas. And Atlas said, type in epilepsy diet lifestyle. And I into Google and I did that. And up came 250,000 hits, right? And I went, oh God, right? And he says, no, and he said, relax, relax, scroll down. Just keep scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. And there, stop, click that one. And I clicked on the link and it took me to a website, dogtourjay.com, food intolerances in people and their pets. Home of the Guard. He was a veterinarian from the United States, and he developed this elimination diet for people with epilepsy, schizophrenia, fibromyalgia, ADD, ADHD, and all kinds of other autism spectrum disorders. And I basically inhaled 15 years of his research, and I put myself on the diet the next day, and my seizure stopped. And uh, I have been living a life of complete devotion and dedication to Atlas ever since. And if one completely devotes oneself to one's innermost being and completely surrenders one's life to one's higher self and really and truly commits themselves to that enterprise, the result is this is the result. You eventually get to a place where you can speak the words of your innermost being. And you no longer as days pass, we identify less and less and less and less as the mortal vessel and more as our true self, our higher self, which is who we truly are. So this comes directly back to the question that you asked earlier about what does it take? Well, what it takes, just like one of the greatest teachers that we have available to us are the sacred union between man and woman. What does it take to have a perfect matrimony between a man and a woman? It takes surrender. It takes devotion. It takes dedication. It takes loyalty. It takes my life is no longer just mine. It's not just about me anymore. And to achieve union with another person, there's, like we were talking about on the dance floor. It's the same thing. It's allowing, it's surrender, it's all of these wonderful things. You leave your ego at the door when you step onto the dance floor. And so, and as for all the suffering and all going down into hell, that relates to the spiral nature of the Aum of life, the analogous ultimate methodology. Because each and every time we revolve around one revolution of the hero's journey, okay, our path is spiral, which means you have to go down into hell before you can rise up and go to the next higher level in heaven. And if you can visualize a spiral in your mind and cut off the two sides, what you end up looks like a ladder. But when you restore the two sides, the ladder is actually a spiral. But this is Jacob's ladder from the Bible. This is Dante's ladder from Dante's Inferno. Though the ladder that stretches from the heavens to the hells, and the angels and walk up and down this ladder, like ascending from descending from heaven down into hell and then back up again. Because what Jacob's ladder secretly encodes is the process of the Aum of life. You cannot uh, you cannot become stronger, you cannot grow, you cannot evolve without facing challenges and difficulties, without facing the adversary. In the same way, you can't build muscle without pumping iron, right? You can't improve your VO2 max without doing aerobics, right? Aerobic exercise. You can't become a better pianist unless you practice. And in our book, we have this visual aid that states that life is baffling, because you know what baffles are? They're like the rocks in a river that create rapids, but baffles are basically obstacles that you put in a flowing channel of water, and it causes the water to spiral and create eddies and vortexes and stuff, because that's what creates vibrant, living water. It's known as structured water. It is more vibrant, it's more alive, it's able to dissolve more minerals and carry more minerals. It's also more refreshing. That's why mountain spring water is so refreshing, but a stagnant, tepid pool, right, becomes stagnant and putrefied and filled with algae, and nobody wants to drink from that, right? But a mountain spring water seems so fresh and inviting and everything else because it's vibrant, living water. But look at what created that vibrant, living water, the rapids, the baffles. So all the obstacles, all the so-called negativity in our life, all the suffering that we face, it's all there to make us better. It's the gymnasium of life for our innermost being to increase our level of being. It's you have to descend into your, and we like to talk about video games a lot because it's a fantastic analogy. But if you've ever played a role-playing game or one of these fantasy role-playing games or any video game where you go up levels, right? Like even at the end of a level of Super Mario or whatever, you have to beat some boss at the end of the level, and then you get to go to the next level. And guess what? The next level is even harder than the previous level. But you're getting better at the game. But that's that spiral, right? So you go down into the dungeon, You defeat the boss, and then you come back with the experience points and at a higher level. This is basically the foundation of Dungeons and Dragons and the foundation of every computer role-playing game or role-playing game ever invented. Because it is, and people, it resonates so deeply with people. Video games and role-playing games are so, people can lose themselves in it so easily, precisely because it is completely one-to-one analogous to reality. And the reality that you and I are characters in an MMORPG, and our innermost being is here playing, facing challenges, right, in order to gain experience points, in order to go up in levels.
How do we give ourselves over to this opportunity? How, because in today's life, in our culture, it's so difficult. You know, we've got to go to work, pay the bills. Most people are just living paycheck to paycheck. They're overwhelmed with stress. How can we let all of that go and go within and give ourselves over?
Well, there's a number of, well, first of all, we have to be infinitely practical, right? So we have to be practical. So we don't want to suggest that the answer for everybody is to quit their job and, you know, put on a backpack and go wander the earth or something. That's, we're not saying that at all, because that might very well be antithetical to what you're here to do. However, no matter where you are, no matter what situation that you are in, you can begin here and now. And the first step is to begin to establish a deeper relationship with yourself and your divine mother. We haven't mentioned her yet, but she's an aspect of our innermost being, because our innermost being, our higher self, is not an I. Okay? Our innermost being is a multiplicity. Well, we don't want to get bogged down into too many metaphysical details, metaphysical science around this, but what is important to remember is our divine mother, because she furnishes us with all that we need in our life, including all of our tests, trials, and ordeals. She is the one orchestrating, like, to use the Dungeons and Dragons analogy, she is the dungeon master. Because she is divine mother nature, she is able to orchestrate all of physical reality, because mechanical nature is her lower aspect, it's her shadow. So she rules and governs that aspect of our life, that aspect of our existence. So even all of our egos are there to teach us something. But we can't learn if we don't observe, right? You cannot know what you do not see. And you have to, and you cannot just think about it. You have to know it consciously. So self-observation and self-remembering are the first two key steps in the 7 steps of the Alm of Life. We're going around one revolution of that spiral. The second step, so that's the first step, to know yourself. And that includes knowing your false self and all of the egos. And by egos, because we don't have one ego, we have many egos. We have fear, anger, lust, greed, pride, gluttony, laziness. And many of these egos have many different faces or many different forms. For example, a lot of people don't realize that pride and shame are the same ego. They're two sides of the same coin. And on the surface, it seems like they're opposite, because pride is narcissism and shame is self-loathing. Narcissism is too much self-love, right? And on the other side, you have too much self-loathing. And in our rational mind, we're seen as those as being two opposite ends of a spectrum, right? That's a lie. They're like this. They're two sides of the same coin. Because the line that separates the narcissist from the drug addict is a hairline. It's a slip on a banana peel. And very often you'll discover that that narcissists are very susceptible to addiction. Because what is addiction? All addiction is a form of self-loathing. It's self-destruction. It's and people what the addiction does is it medicates the person, it numbs them to their self-loathing. So when someone who's a narcissist, right, and it's for whatever reason, they on a something happens, and just on a like again slip on a banana peel, and they can fall from being a narcissist into complete self-loathing and into complete addiction. That there's no vast gulf between many of the aspects that we like to think are extreme opposites of one another. We write about in our book, for example, the experience that we had in Japan, which revealed to us one of the most important pieces of wisdom that was ever revealed to us. And it was revealed to us in the harshest possible way, in a life lesson. It was a test that we failed. And we won't, walk you through the details. We write about it in the book, but we ended up holding the evidence in our hands. And the piece of wisdom was the line that separates Christ from Antichrist is a hairline. It's a slip on a banana peel, right? So again, here is a concept that we have in our minds where, oh, saints and gurus and Buddhas and, you know, Christified masters or whatever, they're all over on one end, and then all the black demons and the nasty people and the megalomaniacs and everything, they're all on the other end of this spectrum. But that's not the reality. The reality is that a fallen angel or a fallen bodhisattva, right, the higher you are, the farther you fall. This is what every Shakespearean tragedy taught us, that these great men, in one moment, of impropriety, in one moment of giving into temptation, into being possessed by some flaw, some tragic flaw, their entire life plummets down into the depths of hell. And they find themselves on this downward spiral, and it's just this precipitous fall. And the experience of this you can see in history as well, but also in literature and tragedy and in scripture, in mythology, is that it's always this way. There is no vast gulf if you want to, separate a saint from like someone like, you know, the fellow with the mustache in pre-World War II Germany. We won't say his name because I don't know about the platforms you're on, and what kind of censorship they're into. But regardless, when we think of truly evil people, right, there's an expression, and we say in esotericism, every angel was once a demon, and every demon was once an angel, right? And just look to your own life. Like people they can verify this for themselves, right? Or somebody maybe you knew, or maybe yourself, you were walking on cloud nine and everything was going perfectly in your life, and then one thing, one change, and one error, one mistake you make, and then everything just nosedives, and then you find yourself in living hell the next day. Right? So this is the reality.
So everything is like an eternity, like the infinity symbol, what comes around goes around constantly. And now we're here as humans on this earth. And so we now have the opportunity to exit the earth cycles and start anew in another dimension or realm. Is that correct?
There are two aspects to that. One, as individually, yes, of course, that's always an opportunity that is there for us to do the work on ourselves, right? But then there is also the question of the fate of this humanity and the future of humanity on this planet. And that question is, the two are interconnected and interrelated. So there's another work that we Atlas are here to do. We're not just here to help individuals, awaken and achieve self-realization. That's wonderful, but there are many, many people who are working on that. But what we are also here to do is, well, we're an ark builder. In the times of Atlantis, in the pre-Andaluvian period, our counterpart was called Noah. So, because we are at the end of a humanity, and at the end of a harvest, the farmer picks the best fruit to save the seeds, the best seeds with which to plant next year's crop. In other words, the next humanity on this planet will depend largely on the best seeds chosen from this humanity. So there's more at stake here than just you or I and the fate of our immortal soul. There's more at stake. There's much more at stake. The golden age depends on how many seeds we can put away, because it's not as the new age people think. It's not what they believe, that the world is on the verge of a massive global awakening and a new golden age is going to spontaneously appear for this humanity. That's not the way nature works. That's not the way, on the level of mechanical nature, everything dies. Everything has its end. And this humanity has to have its end. Just like every civilization rises and falls, even the giant sequoias in California or in Washington State, even they die. Even stars and galaxies die. Planets die. There's no way that our humanity is going to live on forever. That's not how that works. Our humanity is going to die. But from the best seeds of this humanity, the next humanity and the new golden age will be planted and will rise and will be born. This is the story of Noah, right? But this humanity, remember, uh, what we understand as humanity and civilization, everything else, it belongs to mechanical nature. Your body, your physical body, belongs to mechanical nature. Mother Nature is basically loaning us the bodies that we're in. And Mother Nature wants them back, right? She's going to recycle everything. She's going to reuse everything. Nobody recycles better than Mother Nature. So and so everything that we built up on this humanity, it's got to be destroyed. Another way to think about this and why it has to die is, if you're familiar with a serpent, you're a snake. And now the snake is a universal symbol for Divine Mother, Devi Kundalini Shakti. So the serpent is the universal symbol for Divine Mother Nature. And the reason that is because every now and then, on a regular basis, a snake must shed its skin. And if you've ever watched a snake shedding its skin, number one, a snake breathes through its skin. Okay. And if that skin is not soft and pliable and flexible, then that snake won't be able to move, it won't be able to slither, and it won't be able to breathe. It'll suffocate. So a snake that has dry, brittle, old, crumbly skin, it's so irritating to the snake and suffocating to the snake. The snake must shed it for its own sake, for the sake of its survival. It must be shed. And underneath is growing this new, supple, pliable, moist skin. So this happens on a regular basis with the snake, and this happens on a regular basis with the earth, because a humanity is just part of the body of this organism, this being called planet Earth, because it is a being. It has its own monad. The monad of this planet being, the monad of this being, the innermost being, the higher self of the planet Earth, is called Melchizedek. In the same way that the higher self of Attila, my higher self is Atlas, the higher self of the planet Earth is Melchizedek. And Melchizedek has a physical body. That's called the planet Earth. And all of our karma, all of our experience is tied to the karma of this planet and the karma of Melchizedek.
Is that where we are headed as individuals? Eventually, we'll become a body of a planet.
Now, you're talking about a level of being that's very, 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 very high. Before you can become that's known as being a cosmo creator. To be reborn as a planet is to be reborn a cosmo creator. And to be a cosmo creator, you must first be an ascended master. But you can't be an ascended master until you're a resurrected master. And you can't become a resurrected master until you are a master, a proper master. So to become a resurrected master, only bodhisattva can become resurrected masters. Those who walk the path of eliminating all of their karma in all of their egos in one lifetime, and then they die, and 3 days later they return from the dead with practically no personality, no metaphysical aspect of their mortal vessel. At that point, they're reborn a Christified master. So in our case, if we would like to use our example, just for the sake of argument, we would, if we were to fulfill the path that we are on, at some point we will die, and we will come back, and we will be at that point a living embodiment of Alux, right? So Attila will be gone. The physical body will still be here, but Attila, the personality and everything else will be gone. At that point, the relationship that we will have is like the relationship I have with Atlas, only the relationship will be between us, Atlas, and Alux, which Alux is all light, all lux, right? But it's also God light. Al lux, as in Allah, right? So Al lux, it's all light, it's God light. It's the fire of fires, the light of lights, and the being of beings, also known as the cosmic Christ, the Christos force, Krishna, Quetzalcoatl, has many names, but it's the second logos. That is that aspect of God, the absolute, which descends down the tree of life. So it's the lightning bolts. It's the Sig rune in the Norse Futhark, the Norse alphabet, the Sig rune. That lightning bolt shaped S, or it looks like a zigzag. That's related to Thor in Norse mythology, because Thor, who's Odin's son, right? Thor, the son of Wotan or Odin, and Thor has the lightning, right? Well, in Greek mythology or in Roman mythology, I always get too confused. It's Zeus, right? And Zeus hurls thunderbolts. And it's interesting that the name Jesus in Hebrew, it's Hey Zeus, and Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, right? Jesus is the lightning bolt, that which descends from heaven down to earth. So you see, all of these symbols are all the same symbols. All the religions of the world, all the mythologies of the world, throughout all time and history, were all encoding the same metaphysical science. There is no tension or friction between them, but that which our ego minds put there in order to keep us asleep and to prevent us from actualizing, to prevent us from becoming first Buddhas, awakened, enlightened, in other words, true human beings, and then to become masters, and then to become resurrected masters, and finally to become ascended masters. And once we achieve that level of ascended mastery, then we have levels in the supernal worlds. And then somewhere in there, we have opportunities to, on the next cosmic day, right? Because we're living in a Mahamambantar, the great cosmic day, or the great outbreath of the universe, right? So after the end of this breath, the universe will take the great in breath, and there will be a great accounting. And everyone who's achieved levels of ascended mastery will have the opportunity to incarnate in the next cosmic day, in the next universe. They will have an opportunity to incarnate as a planet, as a cosmo creator. But before then, there's lots of work that they have to do first, working with mechanical nature and, with ecosystems and all sorts of things. Like we have a lot of, because you can only manage a whole planet if you've managed literally millions and millions of organisms in an ecosystem. So there's a lot of, like I said, the game that we're playing right now is a certain game, but in the higher levels, in the supernal worlds, the game changes, right? Because our level, we're at a different level. So now it's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different um, challenges that we face and challenges that we that deal with. So, for example, when in the Bible, when they speak of Jehovah Elohim, and or in some traditions, they talk about the Anunnaki, the so-called creators of humans. Those are all cosmo creators that created this humanity and that manage humanity on this planet. Those are all ascended masters, and they are cosmo creators on a lower level. They're not managing an entire planet yet, but they are together working on managing a humanity.
I want to wrap this up by giving people an opportunity to have the information on how to get your book and how to connect with you. So your book is available on Amazon.
It's on Amazon, it's on Audible, it's on Barnes and Noble, Booktopia. You can also get the audiobook on Apple uh, ebooks or what, and the ebook is available as well if you have a Kindle, right? And you can get it in paperback and hardcover. So believe me, you can find it if you really want to. But you can also go to our website, atlasalex.com, and or if it's what's easier to remember is atlas.info, and that'll take you to our website. And then we have a section for books, and we have a page on our book which has direct links where you can buy the book. It also has all of the figures and videos that are in the book, because we did something interesting. We have videos in our book. If you want to know how we put videos in our book, you'll just have to buy it and see for yourself.
That's awesome. And your YouTube channel, what is that called?
So it's youtube.com/c/Atlas Information. That's
Wonderful.
that's 3 words, Atlas in formation.
Okay, got it. Well, thank
Okay.
you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having us. It was a
Yeah.
real pleasure.
Well, you're just a wealth of information, and I was fascinated by everything. We may be able to have you on as a guest again soon. And I wish you the very best. I'll be in touch shortly.
Okay, so we look forward to it. Thank you, Tia.